Greetings, I'm Sue Hausman from S&H Presents, and I'm here to share with you one of my favorite new products because it's going to save you so much time and make your pressing so much easier. I met Kathy at a show and she was brand new to the industry. You know, I truly believe that many of the new products for sewers and quilters have been developed by sewers and quilters who saw a need and got their husband to build it for them. And that's just what Kathy did. She invented the Steady Betty. And the Steady Betty is a pressing surface that isn't foam. You think it is, but I know you all know if you were to put an iron flat on foam, that wouldn't be very smart. It's a special fiber foamy product that takes heat, and it is for your pressing. Here's what Kathy showed me first thing. She showed me that she was a quilter and she went to press quilt blocks, and of course she would press them flat like this first, but she said, Sue, when I would open them up to press them like this, and I'd press them from the wrong side first, and then what would happen would be I would get a pleat right here. Oh, you've done it too, right? You've got that little pleat there. Well, you see, because of Steady Betty, when we put our fabric onto this surface and we press, it doesn't move. It stays put. So you open it up and you press, and notice when I even pick it up, it doesn't fall off or move. And so you will not get any of these little pleats anymore when you press those quilt blocks. Well, I think you can see that Steady Betty comes in a couple of different sizes because I have a couple sizes here. So let's talk about that first. This is the smallest, 12 by 12. Most people start with that. And it also comes in different colors, the blonde or the gray. And it's really a personal preference. By the way, people ask me about steam, and I want to be sure to tell you that you don't want to over steam or just pour water on this, but you can use steam for pressing your quilt blocks. Leave it flat to dry then so that it doesn't warp. If you're a heavy steamer, you may want to look at Kathy's newest product, the Steady Betty Pin and Press, because one side is the typical Steady Betty and the other side is the thicker board so that you could get it wetter without any warping problem. But keep it flat as you're finished using it, and you shouldn't see a problem with the general use of steam as I used it there to press those blocks open. So 12 by 12. Now people said we want it bigger. So guess what? Kathy and Gerald created a bigger one, 16 by 16. And so both in the blonde and the gray and in the pin and press. So you have the different sizes to choose from, and the color is simply personal preference, which one you like. I'll show you why I started with the 12 by 12 and ended now with the 15 by 16 or 15 by 24, 15 by 24, because I use it for many other things besides pressing quilt blocks. Well, and much of my quilting is done with long strips that then I'll cut and split. Of course, I don't do any cutting on Steady Betty. I would always put it on my rotary cutting board for cutting those blocks and splitting them into strips. So quilters love Steady Betty for pressing their quilt blocks and for pressing their quilt tops. Well, when Kathy first showed this to me, my immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, this would be fabulous for pressing embroideries, because when we take embroideries out of the hoop and we go to press them, we know to put them with the embroidery side down, and sometimes we'll do them on a towel, but you know, as we press them, guess what happens? They shift. Now, a lot of times I want to use a lot of steam, but when you press your embroideries and they shift on you, guess what? Especially down toward the center of the embroidery, the little puckers get around the embroidery. And you can see with Steady Betty, as I press, well, let's leave one side unpressed and one side pressed, and you can see the difference in those two sides where we have no little puckers around the embroidery. So lots of people love it, and I do a lot of embroidery, so that's why I needed my bigger one. So maybe you're going to embroider and then you're going to piece. And so of course, Steady Betty provides both right there for you. Easy to do, easy to use. The other thing, this is hysterical because one day the only clear space on my cutting board was where Steady Betty was sitting. And by the way, a lot of people ask me, why is Steady Betty this surface on the underside as well? Well, of course, it's because when you put it down on a surface, you don't want it to slip around. And so it has the non-slip surface on both sides. You will also see that everybody loved it so much and they used the 12 by 12 that now there's a pedal Betty. And this goes on the floor under your sewing machine, and your pedal goes on it and it won't shift around on your floor as this is your foot control for your sewing machine. So lots of great things for sewers. But here's what happened to me. Only clear space on my cutting table was where Steady Betty was. So, of course, I wanted to hoop something, and I just went over to the cutting table and thought, well, I'll have to do it right on top of Steady Betty, right? And so I put my stabilizer on in the two directions, which of course gives you more stability, and I put my fabric in place all on top of my outer hoop. And then when I went to put my inner hoop in place, I loved it, because guess what? It doesn't move around. Now I don't have my little clip open here, that's why I can't get it in. But look at that. The outer hoop is staying put as I'm hooping. And so Steady Betty also serves as a wonderful hooping board. And those of you that have the embroidery machines with the big hoops, you'll want the bigger size of Steady Betty. Most people have at least two because they use them for different purposes. I love it for marking. When you're marking something, you know how it tends to shift around when you're marking. Well, now you can mark on Steady Betty and it stays put. The fabric doesn't move around on you. And of course, you all are probably familiar with these new Frixion marking pens. You notice how I just marked and erased, just like that. Another great product that has come out for sewers and quilters. Remember too, when you're using fusibles, and here's what I do. I use one side of my Steady Betty for my fusibles and one side for my other pressing needs. And that works out just perfectly. And keep in mind with your fusibles, as you put them on Steady Betty and on top, you would be fusing. And of course, don't set your iron on the sticky side of the fusible, right? And read the instructions as to what temperature. A quick tip for you though, if you have got gook on the bottom of your iron, particularly fusible, iron over a dryer sheet and it works great. So I hope you've gotten some really fun tips, and I hope you'll enjoy Steady Betty. Happy sewing!